Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Eat Like Ruby podcast. I am here today with another guest. So, if you are a regular podcast listener, you'll know that September has been guest month on the podcast, and we've had some really cool episodes. And today is our final guest for guest month. And today we have, I'm not going to try and attempt to say your last name.
Refalo.
Oh my God, that's so easy. I call you G Raff because I've got Georgia Mott. So, we've got Georgia Refalo here. And she's quite a big part of Eat Like Ruby. So we have Georgia Mott and then Georgia Refalo. So I just go G Mott and G Raff.
Do you know that was actually my nickname growing up?
Well, that's perfect.
Yeah.
It's even on my to-do list today, on my little Instagram to-do list, it's podcast G Raff, podcast G Mott.
I love it. So good.
But we have Georgia Refalo here today. And I think this is going to be a cool episode because we've had such a mix of guests throughout the month. And that was kind of my point. I wanted to have the mix of, we had Lily, who's obviously really strict nutrition and training for competitive bikini competitions, which is like a whole nother level. And then I think you've got a really cool story, which kind of goes in a whole different direction. I had Em, who is Eats by Em, and she's kind of dabbled in both. Like she's done the strict sort of bodybuilding thing. Now she's doing a lot of like nutrition for performance and martial arts. So that was really what I wanted throughout the month, was to just get different people in to share their experience and their stories and just like hear a bit of a different side of nutrition and training. Obviously, my number one saying is like there's no right or wrong. So I just think it's cool to see real life people implementing nutrition and training in the way that suits them.
I love that. Yeah, and my story definitely is a bit different to those two girls for sure, just because I definitely took it to the extreme, which I think we'll chat about as well. And so now my wellness journey is very much balance, not trying to be too restrictive and all of that type of thing, so that we don't go back to that place and just rewiring all those old beliefs.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to your story, especially in the sense of being, I think when you're like teenager or early 20s, feeling the way you felt and the pressure that you felt and all those things, I think are so relatable. And it's funny because obviously I've known you for a while now, and I kind of, first of all, I never even knew that you'd been in the fitness industry. And then when I heard that, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then when I started to really hear your story on other podcasts and stuff, I'm like, gee, Raf has a great story brewing here. And it's funny because meeting you and just like sort of from the experience of I've had with you, I would just think like, oh yeah, she's a healthy girl and she likes, to live a well-balanced lifestyle and all those things. And I think it's really interesting when you start to unpack it and think, fuck, it actually was quite a process for you to get here.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's cool because, like I said, a lot of people can probably relate, especially to what you went through when you were younger. And then I think it's even cool if someone is possibly in that right now to kind of see you and think, well, she's gotten to this place, which is really cool. So yeah, that's kind of why you're here.
Yeah, love it. I'm excited.
And we don't have full disclosure for everybody. We don't have notes or questions or anything. I literally messaged George last week and I was like, would you want to come on the pod next week? And she's like, yeah, sure. And that's basically the extent of the combo we've had.
That's the planning.
But I reckon maybe just start. So how old are you right now?
22, 23 tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh my God, I didn't know this. I knew your birthday was coming up, but that's cool. My God, you give off such an older vibe in a good way.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah. No, so here I am saying back in your early 20s.
Yeah.
And you're still
She's
there. So if I think about your nutrition and training, and I'd say more so, especially looking back, like your body image journey, when would you say that started?
Oh, God. Earliest, makes me really upset to say, but earliest like body image stuff, feeling like slightly out of place, would have been like 8 years old. Like when I did the work to really like change how I saw myself and really uproot all of the beliefs I had, I challenged myself to sit down and like think about,
like, where did this
start? Why are we thinking like this? And I remember being in grade 3, so I was 8, and that was the first thing where like for some stupid reason, like I don't know why any school would do this, but we all had to weigh ourselves.
Oh my God.
And then the teacher put it up on the board so you could see. And like kids are mean. Like kids will be like, oh my God, like who's that? Who's this? Like,
And so did it literally say like Georgia, 40 kilos
I
or
think it
whatever?
just said my weight, but I knew that like
That one was yours.
that was me. So then like
What was the point of this?
I
in the
don't
school?
even remember.
Like, guess everyone's
It was
way.
like so traumatizing, and I don't even remember why we did it. Like it was probably for some from the teacher's perspective, like just getting them engaged and like doing an activity with it. But like, why?
Yeah,
Why are we
15
doing
years
that?
later, we're
Like,
dealing with the consequences. Shout out to the teacher.
So yeah, love that.
Oh
Ugh,
my
anyway,
God. That's,
Um,
imagine that now. That'd be just.
surely you're
No,
not doing that.
no, that's what
now,
I mean.
but
Like, I feel like it'd be on the news if a
Yeah.
teacher was doing that now. There'd
jump
be a
on the
protest
scale.
and
Yeah, for sure. But I just felt like I always had little bits and pieces where I was like, I'm not quite the size of everyone else. Like I feel bigger than my friends.
Were you bigger than your friends as a kid?
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think looking back, I was. I think like I developed earlier than my friends. Like just little things like that. When you're younger, that's such a big deal. But then by the time I got to high school, I was the same size as them.
Mm-hmm.
But I had so much like
You'd
conditioning that
formed
I had
that.
been bigger.
Yeah.
So I then always wanted to try and be smaller, or I felt like I didn't fit in because I was bigger. But like
You
the
weren't
body
really.
dysmorphia started from such a young age, sort
That's
of thing.
crazy. And I
Um,
feel like that's so interesting with you because I feel like you're a naturally curvy person. Like you've got hips, you've got boobs, like in a good way now.
Yeah, yeah.
But like if you are 8 or 9 years old and none of your friends have that and you start to get it,
100%.
you can see why you would be like, oh my God,
You
I'm
stand
the
out.
odd one out.
100%. You fully stand out, and you see it as such a bad thing, whereas now, like, it's what everyone wants.
Yeah,
You
literally.
know?
I'm like, can I have some of these hips,
Yeah.
George, please? Yeah, that's crazy. And so if you think about being 8 or 9 years old and starting to feel that way, were like at that age, were you starting to think about dieting or anything? Like, where do you feel like that came in?
I think it was towards the end of high school. I was 16 when I got my first gym membership.
Yep.
And that was when I started focusing on it. It was like the toxic days of like Pinterest was a big thing when I was in high school. And like I just remember scrolling and it would be like, drink lemon water and like you lose fat in 10 days and like just all of that. And I remember like being so on that. It'd be like little ab routines and shit like that
Yeah.
that I really started to come across. But then when I was like 16, I joined F45. A new one opened up in my town and it was like a big thing. And so I started going there, and that was really my first like dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
Not being a very sporty kid, I found myself, which I feel like so many girls do. If they're not sporty, they like find a gym and like weights are their thing
Mhm.
because it's just, I don't know, something that works better for us if you weren't like a ball sports
Or the
kid.
runner.
Like you're
Yeah.
you're just good at lifting weights and doing it like that. So that was me. And yeah, 16 was when we dived into it.
Yep. And do you feel like throughout high school, were you conscious of food or dieting or anything like that?
Not so much. I think my family was pretty good in terms of like having balanced meals.
Yep.
And, you know, mum and dad never talked about foods being bad or good or things
Yep.
like that as much, you know, as much as they could in terms of like they still had their own conditioning,
Yeah.
especially my mum, around it. So there was some language around dieting and stuff like that, but never
But nothing
forced on us.
crazy. Yeah.
And it was only until I started like wanting to be conscious of it that they supported me in doing that. And I started, you know, doing little meal preps and doing like, can I buy a protein powder and like have it in a smoothie and like stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so if you've started F45, what happens then? I felt like this is where it gets juicy.
It is. I loved it. I really enjoyed like finding a thing that suited me in terms of like being active and that training. It still does. Like functional training is something that I really love, although not so much like movements that are done at F45, but as a whole, I really like functional training and I think it suits my body really well. So I really liked that. And that was when I really started feeling just the mental effects of training and
In a good way.
in a really good way,
Yeah.
feeling really good, feeling confident because I was like coming home being like, I lifted 40 kilos today or like whatever. And so like I really started to build confidence through that. I also in grade 12, so I was 16 when I was in grade 11. So around grade 12, I was very deep into exams, trying to be good at everything academic. I was really one of those kids, and the pressure on myself and trying to like maintain that standard really burnt me out. I got really anxious. I got so burnt out to the point where I just remember being at school and it felt like everyone was like moving around me and I was just standing still. I couldn't study anymore. Like I couldn't retain anything. Everything started to go kind of like pear-shaped, which was so out of the ordinary for what I had been like. I was just always a high achiever, always, the best in the class, whatever. And so I started dealing with some really like dark mental thoughts and I started feeling really depressed and not being able to get out of bed and all of that type of stuff. So then going to school as well, having all of your peers around you and then like saying stuff about you, why aren't you at school and like all of that type of thing. It was like gym was my 1 hour to just completely block out all the noise and not have, what my parents thought, what my teachers thought, what my friends thought, whatever, just block it all out. Everything that was like rolling around in my mind, I could just completely zone out, turn up the music really loud and like obviously F45 is HIIT style training. So like you're just going the whole time and you don't have time to think. You're like dying. So that was what really kind of made me addicted to it because I was like, cool, that's my thing. That's my outlet. And then it became a coping strategy.
Yeah.
Mm.
So when you're at school, because you went on to do fitness, when you were at school, were you working towards something else or you weren't sure? You were just trying to sort of do the best you could?
Yeah, I was working towards physio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and around that time, so like 6 years ago was when I left school, I think. Physio was one of the really competitive ones. In Queensland, it's like you get your OP, but the OPs change for the degrees depending on how much demand there is for them and stuff like that. So to get into physio at the time, it was like an OP1. You had to get an OP1, whereas like you'd usually sit between like 1 and 5, say. So that's what I was working towards. And that's obviously a lot of pressure to try and like get that. I ended up getting an OP2.
Oh my God.
Which is still great.
Yeah.
But it meant that I didn't get into my course.
Oh my God.
So then I had to completely pivot. So I knew I was like going towards the allied health sort of space. And then I ended up choosing dietetics as my course. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's happened when training and everything started to become a negative thing? And were you studying dietetics at that time?
Yeah. So fast forward a bit, we leave uni. I start my dietetics degree, which is 4 years, and I simultaneously started.
Did you say you leave uni or you left school?
Left school, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start uni, and I moved away from home. I started doing my Cert 3 and 4 in fitness at the same time as starting my degree because I was like, I can get this done in 12, 18 months and start working in the fitness industry. That's what I really wanted to do alongside studying.
Yeah.
And have a job that I felt like gave me a bit more purpose than just, retail or like just something random sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So that was what I was doing and studied simultaneously doing both of those things. And then about 12 months later, I got a job at an F45 and kept studying dietetics full time. I ended up getting really burnt out in doing that in terms of like I was working from 4 till 10 in the morning. I would come home, I'd study like 4 subjects and then go back to work 4 till 7 at night and then obviously trying to get my training in between and like eating as best I could and all of that type of thing. It it became really negative, just the amount of stress I was putting on my body and all of the standards that I was trying to hold up to try and be like perfect. Like I was getting all my sessions in and I was smashing myself in at like every single session. I wasn't listening to my body in terms of sleeping in, resting, whatever. And I was basically just eating as little as I could. So
Yeah.
not so much tracking, but just trying to eat all clean and in the smallest amounts that I could get by on.
Yeah. And did you feel weird? Like, did you feel like you were studying one thing, but you were personally eating a different way? Or had you not got that far
Yeah.
into studies yet?
They said to us at the start of the degree, like, you'll feel like you'll go from being like food is food to then being like, fuck, food is so complex and like there's so much we have to think about, to then you'll finish your degree and you'll be like, food is food.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. The more you know, the more you go like, it's not that deep. We don't need to be like over analyzing everything. And
I feel like it's like, as a bit of a side note on that topic, when you are studying nutrition and then you might just learn about one thing that's like omega 3s, and then you're like, oh my God, do I get enough omega 3s?
exactly. And that's
then
what
you're just
happens.
researching
Yeah.
omega 3s, and then you're like, okay, I need to bring this, and this into my diet. And,
Yes.
and then like the next week you learn about iron, and you're like, oh my God, how do I get the omega 3s and the iron?
Literally.
And like, I
Oh,
think
God.
that mentality of like what you were saying, where it becomes really complex and then you come out the other side. I think, yeah, as you learn one thing, you're so adamant on being perfect with that thing. And then you learn the next one, you want to be perfect with that. And then you get to a point where you think, if I am including all of these things overall most of the time,
Yeah.
whatever,
They're gonna be fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah.
process.
100%. And that's definitely what happened. So I think like at the start, I didn't really put two and two together that I wasn't acting in a way that was like holistic sort of thing, which like a dietitian really promotes. I was just very much on like the eat as clean as possible and like that's good sort of thing. We don't eat junk food and all of that type of stuff. So yeah, I didn't really see like what I was doing at the time. Also because you're doing everything to convince yourself that that's
Like you're
the
doing
way
good.
to be, and you get a lot of accolade for being healthy and always, saying no to the cake, or, like the amount of times I got told like, you've got such great willpower and like stuff like that. But it was because if I ate it, I would go home and cry sort
Yeah.
of thing. So like it wasn't healthy me saying no. It wasn't me saying it in like a, no, I'm full right now. Like it was me saying that that's bad. Like don't do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't a good place.
Yeah. And so what would you say was sort of, because I feel like when you think about starting to sort of go through that mental health stuff in high school and then going into uni, working all of that, it's quite a long time that you
Yeah.
were dealing with all this stuff. What would you say was sort of the peak, the low?
Yeah. So in 2021, I believe it was, I had been working at the gym 18 months and
Still at uni.
still at uni.
Yeah.
That year, at the start of the year, I dropped a subject because I was just not coping with how much I was working and how many shifts they were putting me on, and the culture wasn't so great at that workplace. So I dropped something, and then I was getting to a point where I was like, I actually physically don't feel like I can get through this degree. Like I've still got, if I drop this one subject, I'm going to have a whole nother 2 years on top of what I already had, just because of how placement works with being a dietitian and stuff like that. And I couldn't get my mind around that. And it was a very similar feeling of like trying to get through my grade 12 exams when I was super burnt out. Like I was just like, there's no way. Like I feel like I'm going to throw up just thinking about how I'm going to do that.
And especially like it's not like 2 months.
Yeah,
Like it's 2 years, 2+
100%.
years to go.
So then I started dabbling with the idea of like, what if I try and just switch to just nutrition?
Yeah.
Because obviously you do them simultaneously and I can get through it a bit quicker. So that was the choice that I made. And basically from there, like everything hit a peak where I was binge restrict for months on end. I would end up really, really sick and like having panic attacks over how much I was like eating
So
And
were you in like a real like binge eating?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I never got diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I definitely had tendencies, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so that was my
Do you feel
life.
like that came from the actual food restriction, like cutting out food and then being like, fuck it, I want all of it? Or do you
Mhm.
think that was like a stress thing of like, I'm so stressed, food will relieve my stress? Or maybe both?
Yeah, I definitely use and still find myself, it's like a comfort thing for me to help with all of those emotions. But it was also just, I was getting to the point where it wasn't even conscious anymore. It was like my body was like starving. Like it was like I would be standing in the pantry consciously knowing what I was doing and being like, you don't have to do this. Like you can wake up the next day and, eat like however much you want. That's fine. Like just close the pantry. And it was like my body was just like, nah, like we need so much food right now
Yeah.
because I just wasn't the amount that I was training. I was doing like over 20,000 steps every day. Like it was just insane. And it got to a point where I was like, I just physically can't stop myself right now. Like it's just screaming at me. So
Yeah.
it was all I thought
And
about, everything.
were you lean and light at this time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The leanest that I had ever been, it was like one of those things where there was a challenge running at the time, and my friend who was a trainer was like, oh, like we should just do our scans and like take some photos just because that's what's happening that day. And it was the first time I had gotten like a before photo taken of me where I was like, I'm stoked with that. Like
Yeah.
I was so happy, and I got my scan and it was like awesome. My muscle mass was through the roof and body fat was quite low, and so I was stoked.
So like on paper, killing it.
Yeah.
At home, dying.
Yeah, and I even had someone ask me around that time like, are you preparing for a comp? And
Yeah,
I was
wow.
like, no. But thanks, like that's nice. Yeah, I was basically like at that point I had such a shit relationship with food. I was dropping out of this uni course. I was feeling stressed to go to work every single day, and when I would get there, I was just like like I wasn't my usual self. I was just kind of there to
Mhm.
be there, and that was when I decided that I was going to leave. And
Were you living at home or by yourself? Did you
by
have a partner?
myself. I didn't have
Living fully by
Yeah,
yourself?
fully by myself. I had met Will like maybe 2 months prior to that, to quitting my job,
Yeah.
and then I fell into the deepest depression of my life. I
And so when is this? How long ago from now?
midway through 2021, so about September
So 3
2021.
years.
3
Not
years.
that long.
Not that
Like it
long.
is, but it's not.
And like I think we'll chat about, like I'm still recovering from it. Yeah, still trying to find my feet with what balance looks like for me and all of that, because it's such a process pulling yourself out of that.
Yeah.
Basically my body was so stressed to the point where my mind definitely gave out first, and I was feeling a lot of like anxiety, and that depression was starting to seep in. As soon as I quit my job and like allowed myself, I had some time on my hands, my body just shut down. Like I didn't have a period. I couldn't get out of, like I couldn't just like jump out of bed. I felt sick all the time. And as much as I tried to push through and, find answers quickly and just keep moving on, because that was all I ever knew, it wasn't what was meant to happen, and I ended up becoming really, really depressed. I pretty much didn't leave my house for the best part of 6 months.
Wow.
Mm.
And so when you quit your job, were you in the mindset of like, okay, I'm in a really bad place. I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to look at my binge eating. I'm going to look at all these things. Or was it more just like, I'm fucking exhausted. I quit.
Yeah, it was more like that. It was more looking at, they're overworking me, like they're putting me on too much. That's not going to change. They're not getting any more staff, like things like that. And the workplace itself, I'm like, I don't think it's good for me right now. I feel like I know that I need to gain weight. I need to do all of these things. And that's so the opposite of what everyone is talking about 24/7 around me.
Yeah.
So I was just like, it's not the right place for me. I need to get
Yeah.
out of here.
Did you have, if you don't mind me asking, was there an element of well, I need a job to pay my bills?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Because I think a lot of people listening
Yeah.
probably like, did you just not work for 6
Yeah,
months? Or
100%. I didn't work for about 3 months. I had savings that got me through that time,
yeah,
and there was so much guilt around, I'm not like moving forward.
yeah,
Like, and being such a type A person where I just wanted to, everything that I did was tied to how productive I was, and everything I felt was tied to how productive I was. And
I think even when you have savings and then you start using the savings, you just feel like you're going backwards.
you do 100%. And I had to tell myself over and over again, like, this is what you have to do. Like,
what's the alternative here, really?
Yeah. And I was in a bad spot. Like, I just going to another job or something like that, like, it just wasn't the answer. My body needed a break, sort of thing, and I needed to fix some stuff. And then,
And so had you started seeing Will?
yeah.
And so Will is the current boyfriend for everyone listening. Was he like aware?
Yeah. So
He's a bit of a champ. If
he really stuck
been
by me.
through it all.
I can't talk about too much, otherwise I'll cry.
Oh.
He was amazing. I met him, like I said, a couple months before I quit my job, and then he like sat with me through the worst of it. He was in Brisbane. I was on the coast, and so like he would come out on a Friday night, or I would go there sometimes, but more he would come to the coast. And yeah, and I was like living for those weekends, just like getting through to see him. And then, we would go and do stuff or whatever. And so slowly I started to rebuild myself. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty dark for a while.
Yeah. And so what do you feel like was sort of the shift to then start coming out of that? And like, where did you first go back to work?
Yeah, so
Because now you work for yourself.
Yeah, so now I work for myself, but I just got like a random like warehouse job for a little bit, and then I got a job at Snap, so another gym, and I started doing PT again, and working on admin and doing that kind of stuff. So that's where I worked for a good year before I opened my business and started doing all that. Yeah, it just had to kind of be like that. I just needed something where my mind could have a break and I could get through my degree and handle all of that.
Yep.
And
so did you get the nutrition degree done? Yay.
So I did, yes.
Love that. Do you want to work in it like Ruby?
Yeah, I would.
No, that's really cool. And so if you feel like, if we think about sort of being in the worst of it and not working and all of that, as you started to come out the other side, were you, like, how did you navigate the binging and sort of getting back to like, quote, normal eating and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the depressive slump that I went into really showed all of the beliefs that I had, because like everything in me it was just a constant battle in my mind of like, you should be doing more, you should be training, you should be, eating better, like whatever. And because I can't even, like, if you've been through it, like it's just your whole body, like you just can't do it. Like, you know what you have to do and you know that it's not that hard, but like for some reason your mind can just not get you to the grocery store or like take you outside for a walk or whatever. And so like you're in this constant battle. And so in that battle, you're like seeing all of these thoughts that when you say them out loud to someone else, you're like, this is hurting me. Like it's not helping at all. And that's when obviously you're meant to go to a psychologist or someone that you can talk to about this and help you through it. And so that's when I started doing that. I booked into a psychologist, and there's always like a bit of a waiting period and all of that stuff. So I was kind of battling on my own for a bit. But I really started myself just breaking down more.
I remember do you know Lily Turton?
Yeah.
We've had Lily on the podcast before, and she spoke about her binge eating, and she said the same thing. She hit a point where she's like, I just called, I don't know if it was a psychologist or some sort of like help thing. And same thing, they sort of said to her, like, oh, we can see you in 5 weeks or whatever. And she's like, I need someone today.
Literally. Yeah. It was like months that it was because it was just after COVID too. So like
Yeah.
that was the waiting period was like 5 months up to, like a year to get
Yeah,
into
wow.
people. And so I was just hanging out for that. And around that time, I had been delving into more of the fun self development,
Mhm.
like, manifesting and like learning about your beliefs and stuff like that. So I kind of just used my knowledge on that sort of stuff to start reframing some of the beliefs that I knew that I could,
Yeah.
and then deal with some of the more heavy stuff when I got to my psychologist. So I just started thinking about, what type of person do we want to be? Like, how do we want to feel? What are our main values? What are our priorities? And like, none of that was being like the most shredded that I could possibly be. It
Mhm.
wasn't like ignoring my family because I needed to go for a run or a workout or, you know, all of that stuff. So I started getting really clear on that and starting to shift those thoughts to help me get out of, the place that I was in. I started eating more food.
That's even huge to do on your own. Like
Yeah.
that's so to even I feel like so many things I speak about in Eat Like Ruby, things like this, but any sort of behaviors or patterns or cycles or whatever, I feel like awareness is the number one thing.
Yeah.
Awareness of like what you're actually doing, but also awareness that it can change and it can be done differently and all that sort of thing. And to kind of tap into that and become aware on your own,
Mm.
especially as what you were probably 20 years old this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty solid achievement in
Yeah.
yourself to be
Yeah.
like, I actually need to intercept this.
For sure. And I didn't like I had help. I started, once you go through something, then you feel like you're the only person, but then you speak to people about it and they're like, oh, but this person actually had a similar experience. And so then you start following a few people that have been through that similar thing, and you just kind of start building your new belief system being like, oh, that's not the only way. Like,
I feel like
I'm going to be okay.
that's so cool because I feel like even if you think about your story, you probably were following all these shredded six-pack
Mm-hmm.
Fitspos and then you slowly start to navigate away from that and you go to your new thing. And I feel like I experienced the same thing. I almost find myself falling into a mentality now of like, everyone knows everything about nutrition.
Yeah.
And everybody's flexible dieting.
Yeah.
Nobody is on a shit diet anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody does cheat meals. Nobody doesn't get this. I feel like I have times where I'm like, I need to shut down Eat Like Ruby because everyone's eating like Ruby now.
Yeah.
And then it's just because you've kind of changed your, like what you're exposed to and
Yeah.
everything. So you're like, everyone in my bubble is
Literally.
doing it. So I think there's even such a lesson there of like, what is your bubble?
Mm.
Because your bubble 3 years before that, like I said, was probably shredded Fitspos.
Yeah.
So that's all you're exposed to. That's all you're seeing. That's what you're working towards. And then you start to open your mind and then you'd probably slowly be unfollowing those things, following other things. And all of a sudden you find, well, not all of a sudden, 6 years later,
Yeah. Yeah.
you find yourself sitting here and you're like, probably got no shredded six packs
Yeah.
in your
No.
feed except Ruby deep in her fat loss phase.
Yes, but like I can see, the way that you do things, and like we can even talk about it. I've signed up for the fat loss phase
Yeah.
at the end of this year, and I can see that, and I can sign up for that, knowing that I'm doing it for the right reasons this time,
Yeah.
and I'm following you for the right reasons, and I know that you do what you do for the right reasons, and so it's
Just
not
a very different.
totally. It's such a different
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think the really cool thing that you said in there was thinking about like what it is that you actually want. Like one thing we speak about towards the end of the fat loss phase when we start looking at like maintenance and, living this life long term, one thing I always say to my girls is you're going to be eating for the rest of your life. So we want to kind of be organized for that and feel
Yeah.
good about that. And one thing I speak about towards the end is obviously, what do I want my body and my training and my nutrition and all that to look like? But also, what do I want my lifestyle to look like? Because it's very easy for someone to say, oh, I want to have a six pack and this and that and rah, rah, rah. And if we took everything we knew and everything we've applied to you and we said, okay, in order for you to do that, it is 20,000 steps a day. It is gym 6 times a week. It is a really low calorie diet. Do you want your lifestyle to look like that?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm the biggest advocate of really finding the sweet spot where you're like, if that was the scenario, maybe it's like, okay, no, I don't want to do 20,000 steps a day, but I can do 12. So what does that look like? And am I happy to sit there? And then what would nutrition look like alongside that? Am I happy to sit there? And really navigating that sweet spot of, like I said, what do I want nutrition and training and all that to look like? But what does the rest of my life look like? How do they actually go together
Mhm.
for the fact that I'm going to be doing it forever?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so common. I think it's so common at the young age, like you experienced it. And I think people that just haven't really been exposed to all the education and stuff to just be in that mentality of, quote, being good.
Yeah.
Well, being good means gym, steps, low calorie,
Yeah.
clean food, all of that,
Mhm.
and just kind of thinking, I just have to tough that out as much as I can, as long
Yeah.
as I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you come back to the rest of your life and think, fuck, they really don't work
Yeah.
together.
100%. I honestly, like, the biggest thing that I got out of doing all of this was like finding who I was outside of just what my body looked like.
But even, I feel like even that is huge to say at 22 years old, because I
Yeah.
work with women that are 45 years old and
For sure. Well, it's not like that's not the standard
Yeah.
for women. Like,
No, not at all.
everything is what your appearance is. And like, obviously at this time in my life, like, you're 20, it's boys, it's going out, it's all of this. So it's like
Yeah.
you get so much out of, looking a certain way, and guys are complimenting you and they're finally looking at you for the first time and you're like, oh, well, like, it's because of what I look like now, and like all of that. So it's like such a shit show. And I just decided one day,
Like, fuck it.
I was like, well, I'm way more than that. I was like looking like big picture. If you've ever like done any manifestation practicing and stuff like that, like, you look forward at like your entire life. And I was like, I want to be a business owner. I want to be known for this, this, and this. Like, I had such a huge picture of my life. And I was like, not once did I think about what my body would look like in that.
Yeah.
And so then I just have been on a path of just like finding out who I am outside of people caring about what I looked like and me caring about what I looked like. Obviously,
Yeah.
like, I do care, but
Not in it's a different, if it's sort of positive or negative,
For
and if it's
sure.
too far, or like,
Yeah,
I
100%.
think
yeah.
because
and-
even like you said with me right now, like I'm very much like that tunnel vision sort of
Yeah.
fat loss thing, but it's not comparable to what you're saying you went through
Totally.
to achieve fat
Yeah.
loss and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think it's just what the energy is
Definitely.
around it.
100%.
And I think that's really cool, because that's one thing, and I'm going to speak about this a bit more in the coming weeks and months as I wrap up my own fat loss phase. Like, a massive focus of mine, this fat loss phase that I've done has been really different to others, because I feel like in previous ones, I have just been like leaner, lighter, better, and still in a positive way, but very, very body composition focus, which makes sense with fat loss. But in this current phase, and like I said, I'm going to talk about this more in the coming weeks, my mindset has more been like, I'm very much right now, like, what do I want my long-term life to look like? Shaq and I have got some really cool shit happening in 2025. And I keep thinking to myself, what position do I want to be in 2025? Almost coming back to what I said before, what does nutrition and training look like? But also, is that enjoyable and sustainable to slot in to the other things I want to do with my life? And that's been really cool for me, because I think when you're young and you don't have kids and you're just doing your own thing, if you're like, I want to go super fucking hard on nutrition and training, I don't give a fuck what anyone's doing, whatever, like, you can do it.
Yeah.
And it can be positive at times. But yeah, for me, I just feel like I'm in this energy now where it's like what you were saying with that manifesting thing, where I'm just like, what is the big picture and how does this slot into that, as opposed to it being the big picture?
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Because that's when you get into the mindset of, and it's like so toxic for women. I feel like we're all raised like that. It's like, oh, I'll do this when I look like that, or when I weigh a certain amount, or, we'll go on this holiday, or I'll wear this bikini when. And it's like, that's so just not how life works.
Yeah.
And all of those thoughts for me have been completely changed. So now signing up for the fat loss phase, I'm like, I'm literally just doing it because I want to do it.
Yeah.
Not because I don't think that I need to lose weight. I would like to. And like, I think it'd be cool to see where I can find that middle ground now between being super shredded and, gaining weight to be able to get my period back and get my hormones settled and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
To being at a comfortable place where like I do feel confident, doing whatever I want to do, and I can perform well, but I'm not at a place where I'm starving myself and, can't do stuff because I'm too far that way. And all of that type of stuff. So I'm excited for that now.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So there's one thing in there that I wanted to touch on. When you started to come out that other side and you were starting to think all these things, was there still an element of, well, fuck, I've been the lean light girl for ages.
Yeah.
Like, what is it going to look like to move away from that?
Yeah, it still gets to me at
Can
times.
I ask, and you don't have to give specifics if you don't want to, like how much of a weight change are we talking about from lightest Georgia to heaviest Georgia?
Okay, so I'll give specifics because who cares?
We'll get the school teacher to write them up on the board.
Yeah, let's just quickly
Georgia,
write up.
What have you weighed in at this week?
Fuck me. So my leanest, my body scan was 64 kilos.
Yep.
Going full, just like going all in, as they sometimes say, like just completely eating whatever you feel like and trying to find that balance with like sort of eating intuitively again. I got to about 80.
Yep.
So like just over 15 kilos gained. And now I sit at about 76.
Yep.
So like I think with the fat loss phase, like around 70 would be my kind of middle ground in terms of something that I can sustain quite easily. I mean, I run my own business, which is stressful. Like I don't need to be putting tons of stress on my body outside of doing all of that. So just like finding that middle ground.
The real sweet spot that we talk about. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
And so what is the last sort of 2 years looked like if we think about that? Like you've sort of had that initial, okay, shit has to change.
Yeah. It's been such a roller coaster as anyone could like figure out whenever you're trying to shift stuff. Like it's not just a linear, like we're getting better
I'm on my way out now.
Yeah, we're good. We never think like bad thoughts about our body. Like there's been many breakdowns, many like, God, it would be so easy if I was just not self-aware and just would run myself into the ground. And because that's what so many people do. Like so many people that you follow on Instagram and stuff, like they don't give a shit about being the healthiest version of themselves and having their period and having healthy hormones and all of that stuff. So then you're like, well, I can't keep up with them. And so like there's so much of that. And so the last 2 years have been just trying to find what balance means for me, and training is still something that I love, and trying to integrate that in a way where I'm not doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I'm not overdoing it. There's been times when I've underdone it for sure. And so you're trying to find like that middle ground of just really enjoying it for the process of doing it, instead of having to use, I mean, I used for so long, like I'd be laying in bed and my motivation was like, you look like shit, like go to the gym. And that would get me out of bed. Like, whereas I don't have that now. So finding that discipline is a lot harder when you're doing it from a place of love instead of like hate and feeling like you're going to fall behind.
When you're like psyching yourself up, you just
literally,
go.
you're like, you
and
piece
now you're
of
like,
shit.
and now it's like, you don't have to go if you don't want. And now you're like, oh, well, I'm not going.
Exactly. So finding that middle ground has been difficult, and I've come a long way this year, especially in doing that. So I'm excited to see.
Yeah,
where
that's
it goes
really
on
cool.
from now.
I think that's even a really cool thing as well, because I see that so much with people in Eat Like Ruby. The more they get education and understanding around everything, I feel like this is a shift that just happens that people are kind of not aware of until you point it out. But I think a lot of women come in and they've been in that energy for a long time of nutrition and training being that thing that they have to do. And like you said, get up and do it because they feel like shit and all of that. And when we see people get the education and the understanding and they sort of take back their power and everything, there's that shift that happens over time where training becomes, especially in Eat Like Ruby, we do a lot of like gym-based sort of hypertrophy, heavy lift training. People really get in that energy then of like, I'm excited to go to the gym to hit the PBs. How much can I hip thrust today? Oh, Rubes has brought in the hack squat. Like how much can I do on the hack squat? And it's such a different energy. And that's even a cool thing for any Eat Like Ruby girls or anyone at all listening. If you have gone through a journey with your nutrition and training, just think like, have I actually shifted from that like I have to go to gym, almost like a punishment or like a burn calories kind of thing, to like, no, now I just go because I want to get after it.
Yeah.
That's such a cool shift to make. And then that's not to say that you wake up every day keen as fuck, but usually once you get there, you're keen as fuck because you're like, oh yeah, it's hip thrust day, it's push up day, like
100%.
And that's such a cool thing. And even coming back to what I said at the very start, like such a permission slip for anyone who maybe is in the position right now of going to training in a negative way. Like you've absolutely been there, and I've seen hundreds of women there. And the more you really invest in the education, the understanding, and, you know, all of the work behind it, you can get it to such a good place.
Yeah, 100%. Like you want to feel empowered in that, which I think is what your programs do so well, is that they give you the knowledge to then you're like, I can fucking like Christmas, let's go. Instead of having that negative association around all of it and being like, what if this happens? What if I do this? And, you know, what if I can't control myself and all of that type of thing, which is such like exactly where I was.
Yeah.
And
it's such a frantic energy. Like when I think about people that don't have education and understanding of really how to achieve their goals and be in control of all that, it's such that frantic energy. And like you said, you know, I ate a piece of cake, fuck, so much regret, guilt, all of the things, go home, beat yourself up about that, wake up in the morning, go to the gym, you fucking fat shit, whatever it is. All of that is such a sort of scattered on edge energy. And when the more you sort of learn and you get to a place where you're like, oh, I'm eating this because of this and I'm going to gym to work on this. And like I said, that's not to say that every day is just awesome. You still got days where you don't feel like it. But it's a very, very different energy. And that's something I love to point out to my girls is, you know, always being aware of that. Like, have you gone from that real lost, negative, frantic, desperate place to, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's very
it's
cool.
Huge. It is so huge.
And that's like literally the why of Eat Like Ruby.
Yeah.
And even what you just said there, where like, you said like our programs are so empowering because we give people the knowledge. It's funny because Eat Like Ruby has about 8 values and I've always like rattled them off. And then every time I rattle them off, I think I got to condense these. And I've looked at them and been like, but what one would I take out? Yeah. And the other day randomly, I thought to myself, you know what? Like 2 of them are education and empowerment. And I'm like, really, it's education and empowerment.
Yeah.
Like there's other things in there and that's cool. But if I had to like narrow it down, it's education is like the first thing to then lead to empowerment.
Yeah, 100%. You taking control of your own life and not feeling like you need to follow whatever that Instagram girl is doing in her training and not feel like there's just no noise because you're so like you're just in your like, this is what I'm doing and that's all that matters. And that's what I had to learn to get myself out of it. I just had to shut off the noise and be like, this is where we're going. These are the values that we want to portray. These are our goals. Like blinders on, let's go.
Yeah.
And you build so much trust in that process being like, you're fine. Like you don't need anyone's approval. You don't need anyone's attention. Like you are so fine right now. And then it's so cool to be able to build on that after because then you're like, cool, well, maybe I like will go into the muscle gain phase or I will go into the fat loss phase, whatever.
Or
but you're doing
run
it
a
for
half
you.
marathon.
Yeah. And like it's literally just for you. Like I didn't tell anyone when I signed up for the half. Only you guys now, everyone listening knows that I'm doing the fat loss phase, but I'm not doing it for that like pat on the back because I don't need it. Like it's all very much internal now. And
and I feel like that's come up so much in so many episodes. And for people who don't know, Georgia is the owner of the studio where we record. So she's heard every episode before anyone else. And I feel like that's been such a common theme lately. Even if you think about the Q&As where people have been like, oh, do you think you should be training as much as Shaq? Like, are you questioning your training because of how much he's doing? And anything like that, it comes back to what you said. Even when G Mott and I did those episodes about my own fat loss phase, I think in one of those episodes, I can't remember the question, but I was just like, I don't give a fuck what anyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to be sassy. It is because you're just like, no, because I know my goal and I know how to achieve that goal. So I'm never questioning. I'm never seeing Shaq ride to Biwa and back and thinking, fuck, should I ride to Biwa today? Because it's like, it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
You know, and you see someone doing like a crazy random workout, you're not like, fuck, should I get down to the gym and do that? Because you're like, no, I've got my program that makes so much sense for the goal that I have. So, and that really does come back to education because you know
Yeah.
that what you're doing is correct for where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. And it's what is necessary for you to do to be able to get to any place that you want to get to. Like,
Hmm.
I couldn't heal myself if I was laying in bed and I opened up Instagram and saw, Ruby's done 6,000 steps already, or, G's gone and done a workout already. Like, that's not what I needed at that time.
Hmm.
And that wasn't going to help me get to my goal. So I had to be really, really good at just being like, cool, that's great for them, but that's not what we need.
Yeah.
We need to heal ourselves. And that means that we're going to sleep in, we're going to maybe go for a light walk, like we'll figure that out. But it's not like, oh shit, I feel bad. Like, let's just jump out of bed and do this. That wouldn't have got me to the place that I'm sitting in now.
Yeah.
Mm.
So before we wrap it up, what place are you sitting in now? And what was the process of, so Georgia's literally just done the Sunny Coast Half Marathon, which is amazing. What was the process of, like, why did you join that?
Mhm.
Sort of where were you at when you made the decision to sign up for that?
Honestly, I was just really loving running and
And
was
from like a positive,
yeah.
yeah.
I was fueling myself really well. I did the Noosa 10K.
Oh yeah.
And I did that purely just for a bit of accountability because I wanted to stay consistent with 2 runs a week. And I was like, that'd be cool to just build up to that. And then once I got to 10, I was like, well, I could definitely get up to 21. Like, I'm being really consistent. We're at 10, it's easier than going from 10 to 20 than 0 to 20 sort of thing. So I was like, cool, we'll just give it a go. And I really wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. Another big thing that's just like a whole nother conversation is I decided to come off my antidepressants when I signed up for the half marathon.
Mm-hmm.
It was around that time. And so I've been weaning off my antidepressants the last few months. And so the running goal was really something for me to be like, let's tick off something really cool while we're kind of transitioning from, I just feel like I'm stepping into a new Georgia and like a new level of myself. And so I was like, let's have that as something to keep you accountable, to keep you showing up for yourself. There's going to be some hard days in there, but let's do that and just like prove to yourself that you can do it and have a fitness goal that's actually from a good place and not to punish yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, prove that to myself. And so
I love
that's what
that.
I did.
I love that. And I think there's such a cool thing that happens there. I'd love to know if you felt like this happened for you. I see this with the muscle gain girls in Eat Like Ruby. So when we run any sort of muscle gain thing, it's really like you can go into a surplus, get after it like muscle gain style, body composition focused. Or for some of the girls, they're a bit more like performance, PBs,
Yeah.
heavy lift, and just like intentionally get me out of a deficit.
Mhm.
And I'm all for that. Like I speak about that so much. And hands down, the coolest shift I see that happens with these girls is like, I'm prioritizing nutrition and training. I've got goals. I'm looking after myself. I'm making decisions, like informed decisions, positive decisions, etc., without the focus of losing weight.
Yeah.
And that is life changing for someone, especially someone that has spent such a long time trying to lose weight. And I don't want to shame losing weight. Obviously, we're running the fat loss phase
No.
right now. You're in it.
Yeah.
I've done it. Like, obviously, it can be such a positive thing. But I think if you've only ever associated nutrition and training with body composition and especially with weight loss, being lighter, being leaner, being skinnier, anything like that, it's so empowering to be in that position where you're like, I'm still eating well, I'm still training well, I'm looking after myself. Like, this is still a conscious thing in my life, but that's not the goal.
Yeah.
And did you feel like that with the running?
Oh, it was so great. It was like we're finally doing everything that we were meant to do years ago but didn't. Like,
and we were like believing in, but not.
yeah. Like, I come home from my runs and I'm like, fuck yeah, like let's eat. Like,
Yeah.
let's give myself everything that we wanted, like that we need to be
Yeah.
able to sustain this. And that in itself was just such an empowering thing for me that
So
once
cool.
I had kind of ticked that off, then I always had the fat loss phase in my sights, but I was like, I want to see how it kind of fits into this year.
Yeah.
With that not being like the be all end all. Like, I don't need it. I don't need to look a certain way, whatever. But it's all just kind of come at a cool time with the running being over now and I can focus on that and just keep consistent with
Yeah.
what I was doing in that area, not need to progress while I'm in that fat loss. And that's cool too, because there was once upon a time where I would have been like, let's run a half marathon, but let's also be on the lowest calories possible to stay the leanest as
Yeah.
possible and all of that shit, which is just so stupid, like thinking about that now. So
I think it's cool because I feel like you're just in that position that I speak about where you're able to say, okay, yeah, running is the goal right now and I'm going to eat and train towards that. And then now I've ticked that off, fat loss is. So it's like I always say, there's no right or wrong. You can navigate anything and take it in any direction you want at any time. But actually knowing that, understanding that, having the education, the ability, all of that to do that, instead of, like you said, just being like, I need to work at F45 all day every day and then study and then run a half marathon and eat low calories and like, all these things. I feel like the more you know and you really understand, the more you can be like, okay, cool, what makes sense to do right now? I'll do that and that. That one will go to the side for a while. Then I'll pull that one into the focus. That one can go to the side. And that, again, it comes back to that education and empowerment. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's so cool. And I love that you talk about that, like even just for yourself, how you plan out your years as if you would like in a business sort of thing. You don't sign up to do everything in your business on like one day and be like, we're going to get this all done in 3 months. Like you plan it out and you say like, okay, in October, we're going to launch the podcast. We're going to do this, whatever. Same thing with all of your training and nutrition. Like look at your year, look at what seasons you're going to be in. Like I'm coming into a much more calmer season in terms of my business and all of that. So like it works. Whereas once upon a time, I would have just seen, you know, she's doing that, she's doing this, she's doing that, and tried to put it all on my plate when it's like, that's not how it works. Like focus on one thing, get that goal, and then you can move on to the next and add on to it and be better.
Yeah, I love it. Before we wrap up, anything else you want to say?
I don't think so.
No, I think that was so helpful.
Covered a lot.
I think it's just such a cool thing for people to hear and open up the convo. I think people are going to be either at any part of your journey, like we're going to have people listening that are like, I'm at that part, or people that look back and go, yeah, fuck, that was me at some point, which I think is super common. But again, it's just cool to bring a different story to light and actually speak about it and give a bit of evidence and permission for the people that might be deep in it right now to know that it can change. Yeah. And I think we definitely have to shout out your podcast because you speak about all of this so much on there. So what is your podcast?
The podcast is The Wellness Show. It's just recently relaunched after being on a little hiatus for a few months.
But you have a lot of did you delete all the old ones?
No, they're still there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're like over 100 episodes.
Yeah. Big juicy podcast, guys.
Yeah, she's been going through a
Imagine
few
you
years.
just like, oh, delete on 100.
See you later. I couldn't. I was like, no, it has to stay.
Sometimes I have bad days and I say to Gmod, I want to delete everything.
Honestly.
And she's like, talk to me tomorrow.
I could never go and listen to those episodes. Like I would just die.
When we did the fat loss flashback episodes, I was listening to a few, like bits of them. And I'm just like, speak faster, Remy.
Hurry up. It's so bad. You just can't. But.
No, but so you've relaunched it now as The Wellness Show.
Yeah.
Weekly or fortnightly?
Weekly. Yeah.
Love it.
So all the wellness chats, it's very like light and covers a lot of different stuff. I think, we're testing a new little like kind of how we structure it and it's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And also, if anyone wants to start a podcast, are you the girl for this? Yeah. I didn't know if
Look at you just promoting everything I do.
And what's your phone number? Where do you live? What's your address?
So I run Aligned Creative Studio, and so obviously we produce Ruby's podcast. And if you want to know more, you can hit me up. We can put it in the show notes or something.
Yeah. And so does the Wellness Show have an Insta?
Yes,
like
it
a page?
does. It's the Wellness Show Pod on Insta. But you can find everything. My main Instagram is by Georgia Marie, and everything's listed on there. So.
Yeah, cool. And we'll obviously tag you and everything as this comes out. But I think that is all from us today. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope everybody got something out of that. And I think you're going to be the last episode of Guest Month. So we're going to be back next week. We've got some cool episodes coming up. We're making some changes in Eat Like Ruby and especially some changes to training. And I'm going to do some real juicy episodes about that. I'm going to do some episodes about where I'm at and life after my photo shoot, fat loss, all of the things. I think this episode with you and me is coming out the day I shoot.
Oh, true.
Yeah,
End of September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I've mathed correctly on that one. Yeah, so we're going to have lots to chat about over the coming weeks and months, like always. But I'd say that's all from us today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Like always, chuck us a rating, a like, a follow, subscribe, whatever it is, wherever you listen. Chuck us on Instagram, tag Eat Like Ruby. I'd love to know that people are listening and resonating and vibing. And if you liked the guest episodes and you like that style, let me know because we can definitely get some more on. But that is all for today.
Thanks, guys.